Hi there, everyone. Rob here, and welcome to the latest episode of the Better SMB podcast. Hey, we go on a bit of a different journey this time, and we go through a learning and reflection process with the book The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. During this episode, we explore the roles of entrepreneur, manager, and technician and why they're important, but why we need to make sure we skip from one to the other. And that's part of the maturity journey of all new businesses. But it did get me thinking afterwards is that there are a lot of good books, particularly on business performance. So if there is one out there specifically that you want us to listen to, debrief, and make comment on, just let us know. And before we get into the podcast, remember to hit like, share our podcast with others, and do all the things that can support the growth of the Better SMB. Anyway, that's enough from me. Let's listen about the E-Myth. On with the podcast.
Welcome back. I'm David Alterner.
And I'm Rob Ball.
Today we're going to be reviewing a book. It's a book that I read a number of years ago. I loved it, and it really got me thinking about business. It covers the different personas required to build a successful business. And as a follow-on from our last episode about manufacturers leading the charge on improving business performance across New Zealand, we felt this was a great perspective to bring in. The book offers a great framework to think about your business and the people in it, and in particular, your role as a business leader. The book is The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber, and it's an essential book for any small business owner. If you haven't read it, I'd highly recommend that you check it out. The book offers insight into how many business owners may struggle with scaling because they stay stuck in the mindset of what you'll learn about, which is the technician mindset. So today we're going to break down the book's key concepts, and we're going to have a bit of a chat on how these apply to real-world small business challenges. And out of this, come up with some actionable steps for business owners to shift from a mindset of being a technician to being an entrepreneur and growing their business around them. So, Rob, I think you spent some time listening to this on a drive. So perhaps I hand over to you, and let's talk about the three business roles or personas that Michael Gerber identifies in them.
Yeah, no, absolutely, David. I love this book, and really thank you for it was your idea to bring in this topic. It was one of those topics for the podcast that we've been talking about for ages, which is to go back to a couple of sort of foundation books that both of us have read long time in the past. So yeah, last week in preparation for this episode and on my journeys from Hamilton to New Plymouth and back, I was put on the good old ebook and listened to it. So it was actually a really good refresher and good productive use of time, because you can't do anything else in that drive because there's no other coverage. So the ebook, otherwise known as the entrepreneur. So the E-Myth, the E stands for entrepreneur. So the real big focus around, I'll start from the end to the beginning in terms of the maturity of roles that the writer Michael Gerber talks about. And he finishes on the entrepreneur, the big visionary, because when we start a business or we buy into a business, we have that big vision. And most of us then all of a sudden get caught in the weeds of the details of the day-to-day business, and we lose track and we start getting too busy to keep that visionary role going, being focused and doing things that's related to the big picture, the long-term stuff, the growth. That was the ultimate role. But when we come into a business, we effectively create a business, we are creating a job. And that's the technician that he talks about. Hey, I'm a good electrician, so I'm going to start electrician business because, hey, it's fun. And why not work for myself rather than for some other big person who's just taking on all the profits? Because I'm really good at my job and people like me, so this must be a pretty straightforward thing. So you start with the technician, then you go to the manager, which is the organizer, the focus on the systems and processes. And no guesses that this is my favorite role, and I think it's an underestimated role. So that is the person that, starts creating SOPs, the standard operating procedures, starting to write the guidelines, the how-tos, all the detail. So other people, and as you're growing, this could be staff, part-time, casual, others, your partners, doesn't have to be paid. Kids, if you're really early on in your journey, the role of the manager is setting those organizational framework, getting the detail down on paper and not in your head. In summary, he talks about the technician, the doer, getting all the details done, getting busy, being busy, doing the actual work. Then there's the role of the manager, which is that organizer, putting everything on paper, getting it out of everyone's heads and into a system that works. If you do that well, then you have more time being the entrepreneur, the role that got you excited at the beginning, the one that has the big picture, the big details, the vision of, hey, if I created a business, I could actually set one up in Whangarei or Rotorua or what elsewhere in New Zealand, whatever that vision might be. All three roles are important, but for a massively successful SME, the doer, i.e. the technician, needs to get out of the weeds into the manager and then the entrepreneurial roles. So my take on is, particularly in the beginning, we'll go through some of those phases, but you are the technician, but then you need to be acting like the business you want. So you need to put time aside, even if clients are still ringing and jobs are still being done, you need to put time aside to become the manager, set up that business that you want it to be, not that you are now. So I want it to look like this in 15 years' time. Put time aside as a manager to create that system that will support the business in 15 years' time. And then keep it fresh, keep that excitement going by playing, putting enough time to play the entrepreneurial role. So that's my too long-winded way of summarizing that. I don't know. Have you got any gaps in that summary for those three roles?
But the thing I find with that is the business owners starting out, you can certainly see why they're under the pump, right? Because the money comes from doing the work.
Yeah.
So the technician's the guy doing the work. The manager, they're organizing the work, the suppliers. In effect, finance starts to fall under the manager as from a persona perspective, and then the entrepreneur is finding the work, growing the business, that sort of thing. People starting out, it's a wild time because you're having to do all three of those. You can't just focus on the work. If you only focus on the work, at some point you're going to run out of materials, you're not going to pay the suppliers, and work's not going to keep coming in, right? And so we see these things, and there's, I don't remember the exact numbers, but there's a high percentage of businesses that fail within the first 3 to 5 years.
In his way to organize those three roles was to actually write job descriptions for all the different types of roles you are playing in the business. For a really small startup, 1 to 2 year business in New Zealand, that might be just, again, this does not need to be complicated. It could be just a A4, grab a piece of A4 out of the photocopier and write an organizational structure, but then hand write the job descriptions of all the different types of roles. So he was really clear so that enables you to be in the mindset, right? I'm the marketing general manager, right, for the next 3 hours because I've got to sit on social media and set up all my posts for the week. So then you are, I guess, compartmentalizing yourself away from the technician and going, right, this is a really important job because I'm now doing the chief financial, the CFO role, because I'm doing my Xero accounts, or I'm doing the marketing, or I'm the supply chain manager because I'm ringing up suppliers and all that. Get it really clear what role you're playing, so then you don't feel like you're just not letting down, I guess, the technician, that you are playing vital and important roles. But when you're doing that, and as you're scaling up, you can get people coming in at the lowest common denominator. And say for the Sparky, it would be another electrician, or it could be someone coming in to do an apprenticeship, or it could be the office staff member or a virtual VA, whatever those are. But if you've got those job descriptions, you can hand those over and then give yourself, maybe not be a pay rise, but you can at least give yourself a promotion in the organizational structure. And you've got to do that deliberately to get that right mindset of the time that you're spending.
Really, I think the thing there is start as you mean to continue, right? That's probably the first thing that you can do to work on the business, is getting those roles down that you're doing and starting to go, it is 5 p.m. on a Sunday evening. I'm now doing my marketing manager work. Tomorrow morning, I need to go and get materials for a job, but in the afternoon, I'm going to be paying bills and organizing different jobs that we've got on the go. And then Tuesday morning, I'm doing my my networking, because that's where I get all my business from. So now you're starting to get your head in the game of those different activities you're doing to then understand where your time is being spent. The thing that they highlight is the technician trap, and that it's why most businesses fail. So most businesses are started by a skilled technician, someone who's good at the work. But what happens is they normally end up getting a little bit pissed off in their day job or something like that. And we all know people who have done this, and they go, stuff you, I'm good at this. I'm going to go set up by myself. I'm going to become a Sparky, a builder, a whoever. And it's an entrepreneurial seizure. He talks about it in the book. And it's this idea that I'm going to get into business and I'm going to show you, and off we go. The problem with that is that these people are really, really good at doing the work that they've been doing for an extended period of time. So if we stick with the electrician analogy, they're good electricians. There's a whole other discipline required when you start thinking about managing, organizing, sourcing work, driving a business ahead, expanding, funding, all of these other things that aren't necessarily something that technician, for lack of a better term, has been doing in their day job up until now. So this is one of the things where we sort of see people make that big step and they go, yeah, I'm in business, I'm getting out there. But then 2 to 3 years, maybe they bring on a couple of people to do some work. But quite often, businesses end up failing. And a big part of that is because that technician hasn't managed to elevate themselves through that manager role and into the entrepreneur role, or bring someone on to manage the work, and maybe even bring someone on to actually be doing that sales piece or that growing the business, if that's what your specialty is.
And the good thing at the moment is, particularly some of those specialties, you can buy them in as advisory, like a virtual assistant or a bookkeeper or virtual marketing specialist. So those type of roles that didn't really exist even 5 years ago are now becoming more and more prevalent. So if you are the passionate technician and you want to stay in there, at least if you've got that structure on paper, handwritten, then you know which roles aren't being done and how to, or where to fill them.
It also means you can spend a bit of time upskilling in the broader business space while outsourcing some of those other activities that do tend to chew up your nights and weekends. So from that structure, and you get those people that you can bring on board to help you do the things that you're not necessarily great at and don't really want to do moving forward, so that you can take the time to upskill yourself in the areas you do want to develop in, like running the business and starting to become that entrepreneur.
Absolutely. And as I said at the top, I think don't underestimate the role of the manager. because with Michael Gerber, the author, he talks that, the entrepreneur is almost the pinnacle of the role and playing that role, but getting out of the weeds, spending some time in that manager role, starting to organize, document all the detailed jobs and the tasks and the procedures, that enables you to gain time to play that role of entrepreneur. That role, if it's set, the systems and the processes and all of that kind of stuff, if that's set relatively robust even early on, you've got to keep that going. So that role is an ongoing role to make sure that it's all in place. People are following it, because like I've seen in many organizations, there are leaders out there. There are entrepreneurs who have got out of the technician role, and they have spent time in the manager role to get all the stuff out of their head and set up systems and procedures, only to miss out on one small thing, which is how to monitor that. So as you're getting right out of the weeds in the E role, the entrepreneur role, that you can still have an oversight and know that the things that you've put down on paper are doing, the standards are being maintained, and the team that you've got in place are maintaining those standards. That manager role is still quite critical, but it is the threesome that does work. But you're definitely focusing on the manager and entrepreneur.
Well, the manager's the cog in the middle, right? The entrepreneur's dealing with the market, bringing in the work, the technician's doing the work, and the manager's the person orchestrating the middle parts, the suppliers, the funding, the finance, getting paid, paying people, and so forth.
So that's why you do get some self-employed people looking a little bit frazzled from time to time, because there are lots of roles to play, and that's reality. You can't get around them, and this book certainly doesn't say that you don't have to do some of these roles, because you absolutely do. It's a matter of balance. As we've both said, you've got to work in creating the business you want it to be, not the one that it is now or yesterday. So if you want to be a 30-person organization and business, or a hair salon that's got 6 chairs and a whole row of nail technicians, then you've got to start setting up the system that supports that from day one. It might be small steps, but they're a lot easier to take if you're doing little bit often than suddenly waking up and seeing that sort of bursting without any structure.
And so this leads nicely into what Gerber calls the franchise prototype. And I'm not sure if he had the quote, but you look at a business like McDonald's, which is a franchise. It's a massive global business, and it's run by teenagers.
The world's biggest SME, McDonald's call themselves. Go figure.
Yeah, but it's run by teenagers. Yep. You can walk into a McDonald's store all over New Zealand, and you'll be served by a teenager. Generally speaking, I know there's some exceptions. Don't send too much hate mail if you're not a teenager and working in McDonald's. But it's also a great career opportunity for our youth, right? Because you come in and you learn about the power of systemization. And if someone gets to be a manager at McDonald's, then they've received whatever levels of training and all these types of things. While we all might somewhat shun Macca's as a job, it's actually a really valuable opportunity if it's viewed the right way, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. The movie The Founder is one of the favorite movies ever, because it goes into the detail how Ray Kroc, even though he is a little bit dodgy in his business dealings later on, going back to the E-myth, they use McDonald's over and over again about how the franchise mindset, and I'll probably describe it more of that way, even if you're not thinking of franchising your business, but having the mindset of, if you had to, if you wanted to, if you could, what do you need in place that can cookie cut the operations that you're running in your business now to another one, either across town or different country, whatever. And if you have that mindset that goes back to that manager and that systems, processes, and that visionary, then you are starting to create something that doesn't have a hold on you as an SME leader or owner. It means that it's repeatable. Those teenagers can just jump in. The system's there. The training system is there. The skill development programs are there, as well as the standard operating procedures and the expectations and all the other things that come into it. Again, if you start with little bits of building that framework up, then you're creating that franchise mindset. And who knows, you might choose to do it in the end and you've done all the work.
Well, even just if you're building up your franchise business of one location, when you go to sell that business, that one location, having a highly systemized business means that you can take your business manual in effect and you can hand that to the business broker and you can go, well, this is how my business is run. The next person coming in can pretty much take this and off they go, which means you've invested into your business and you've produced an asset that you can pass on, or you can hand that to a manager and you can just become an owner director, shareholder of that business rather than having to work in it. So it's a very powerful way to think about how you start building systems into your business, defining them, documenting them, and then having this is how we do it around here business manual.
And it's not a complicated process to get there, right? I'm doing it this coming week. I'm working with a small team, and I'll count on one hand because I think it is about 5 people in this business. The owner, relatively young, in his mid-30s, he does play the entrepreneurial role really, really, really well. So they've got us in. This is where the E-Myth becomes such a great lean thinking book as well. We're spending Thursday mapping out all the business processes. So it might be more of a value stream map, so the end-to-end process of the business, when a client rings up, right through to delivery, what are all the small steps that require to deliver that? That is the investment of a few post-it notes, or if you want to go budget, go to Warehouse Stationery. They've got their own branded ones, a few Sharpies and a wall, and just mapping out one process a month or a week or whatever. And this is where it becomes part of, very much aligned with lean thinking and leader standard work. So your standard work as a leader is to put 2 or 3 hours a week to start doing these exercises, to start going through these processes, like literally process mapping, post-it notes on a wall, so we can start building up those systems and seeing what's needed. And if you do a future state map, where do we need to get technology? And it might be a glaring big hole, but at least if you see it, then you can budget for it. And it might be 2 years' time, but at least you've got that vision of we're building it. And in 2 years' time, we're going to slot that automation machine or the new widget to help us. But at the moment, we're going to do it manually, but we know it's not going to be a long time. That's how kind of franchise model mindset that they really use McDonald's as a strong example. You go back to watch the founder of the movie, and they've spent time, literally the tennis courts, and they draw out the kitchen so they can actually practice the whole system to make sure it works. So they're putting time aside to work out the kinks. The formula is putting time aside to work on your business. Again, I think we've heard that before, haven't we, David?
Might be one of those things we keep repeating, right?
It is about learning to see where all their issues are, where the opportunities are, where the barriers are for here and now, but also, again, playing that entrepreneurial role where the business should and could look like, even in 1 to 2 years.
Then at the end, they talk about the business growth phases. And people listening to this might be thinking about starting a business. People might be 10, 20, 30 years into running their own business, right? So you'll be at a different stage of this, but he talks about this idea of infancy, that the owner does everything. And then as you move into adolescence, you're bringing on employees, but then also this idea that, well, I'm the owner, no one can do it as good as I can. And that that starts to become one of those things that holds the business back, where actually the owner becomes the cap on the business because they won't let go or they haven't systemized enough. Then next comes maturity, where you've got a business that's structured, you've got clear roles, and then there's systems. Even perhaps just with those basic descriptions, people can probably think about where they sit in those different categories or phases. What do you see when you're dealing with organizations? Are you typically seeing people stuck in that infancy adolescence space, or is it more the adolescence maturity, struggling to get the owner to let go so the business can grow?
Definitely the adolescence phase. I think it's quite easy to get people on board to do, take care of all the tsunami of new jobs and work and all of that, as long as that's the type of business and vision that you've got, and you are trying to get as much sales or jobs, depending on your sector. But it is the adolescence. That's where I see it really tripping up. And 2 weeks ago, I'm thinking of a real case example. I think I even wrote a blog and a few LinkedIn posts around this one, telling the owners to get out of the way of the staff that they've employed. Yes, they might not do it exactly the way you want to do it. You might see a better, an easier, a quicker way. Absolutely. But how the heck are they going to learn how to learn? Is around at the adolescent phase is getting out of the way of your staff. Owners are definitely holding them back. There might have been a mistake or an issue or a blow up or a poor job or whatever in the past. So their way of controlling that is to put more controls into place. So then they become the bottleneck of decision making, right? They haven't stopped and learned as a team of where the system has broken down. And I think we quoted it, or I've certainly quoted it recently. W. Edwards Deming talks about 94% of the problems in an organization are systems related. So if something's gone wrong, it's because of the system. But what we tend to do as an owner is to put more controls on our people. We don't fix the system. So it's that we've talked about, it's that capability of leadership. It's knowing how to build that process and that system up to get out of the way of the staff.
And in a larger business, we call that problem bureaucracy or middle management.
Command and control, or just fucking annoying. So honestly, that's where, infancy, I personally am in the role that I have. I don't see that a lot because people are still trying to build up their business, to build something enough to get someone like me into it. I think adolescence comes along quicker than a lot of people think. But you need to really put that manager hat on and play that role to create the processes, to organize the business, because that will enable you to scale sustainably. Because I know this talks about growth, and we've talked about scaling is a different mindset again to growth, because we don't want growth for growth's sake unless we've got a system that's been built to deal with it. So it is, again, going back to build the business that you want so that you grow in, you might have a process or a system that's really quite oversized for what you're doing now, but you grow into it. It's like, you grow, buy your kids clothes that are maybe a size, or the shoes that are a size too big so they grow into it. You don't buy them shoes that are perfect right now. It's a waste of money.
The important thing for me, I think the first time I read this book, it was probably 20 years ago. And kind of just getting told up front, Captain Obvious, right? You look at these businesses that you don't even think about what goes on behind the scenes. Everything from what goes on at the front counter through to how people make things and get them ready for customers, even the back end supply chain side of things and all that type of thing. End to end, everything's been thought about. And there's actually, in a McDonald's case, there's a team of people who are sitting there thinking about and working on streamlining these things even more. And this is why, as people, they'll get one location and then they can get two and then they can get three, because of the power of those systems taking the work off the people.
Yeah, so just going back in this phase or across these phases, Gerber talks about, with the franchise mindset, we need the organizational development model. So that's, creating an organizational structure that works for that visionary business, that supports the goals that you have at the start. The management systems and systems, processes, marketing, sales, operations, all of that, get that down on paper. This is not the sexy stuff of a business, but it is the essential stuff, right? And then the people systems. How do you hire, train, manage employees? In lean thinking, we use skills matrix a lot. People that are in your team versus the skills that they need and the level, 1 or 0 if they're not trained at all, or 1 if they're just learning, right through to 4 if they're able to train others. So if you do that for a 2-person business, again, it might be a big bit of work to set up for just 2 people, but it's so much easier when you just add in the next 2 or 3 hires that you've got. So if you've got that systemized business, then you can handle the adolescent phase and then grow into the maturity phase in a sustainable way. It's okay to continuously review how those systems look and change it, revise it, because what worked last week might not work next week. So they're your own systems, so change it. But again, put time aside to do that.
So Rob, there's a section on planning. What were your key takeaways from that? I mean, businesses that fail to plan are planning to fail. What's Gerber got to say about the planning side of things?
Okay, so it is very much like systemizing the business statements, really, that he's got, but this is the business development side of it, right? You've got your primary aim. What's that personal goal? And how will the business support that? What are you trying to do? Write that down. Some of us have. I don't know if I ever did, so I'm missing that step. Looking at your strategic and organizational strategies. And we've talked about this ad nauseum on this podcast already. We know that even in New Zealand, 50% of SMEs have a plan. And then we know through the Harvard research that we talked in the last podcast or the last episode, 94 of those plans are poorly executed. So have a plan, have a strategy, right down to your management strategy. So that could be, how do you look at your performance? How do you monitor the performance and quality of your teams that you're now building? So that needs to be quite a strategic thought. So start putting that into place as you're going through certainly adolescence to maturity phases of your business. Because if you're getting yourself out of the weeds, you're right away from the technician role, you need to have a management strategy to keep track of the business, to have that helicopter view. What do those lead and lag measures look like? Your people strategies for retaining, motivating your employees, your marketing strategies and all of that. So writing down, where are your clients, your customers? How are you going to reach them? Have that marketing plan. So not only do you have the role of marketer, but you have a plan and strategy for each of these. And change the word strategy and exchange it for plan. Because people might get freaked out that strategy is this big, complex, wordy sort of document and process. It doesn't have to be. And I know we've talked about it before. A plan could be just a few thoughts down on paper with some goals, targets, and steps to get there. That's all you need to do. As long as it makes sense to you and you're looking at it at least once a week, then it's working. I think it's just using those strategies and that management strategy to build up the framework of the business to make sure it's moving you from infancy to adolescence and maturity, build up the performance and quality dashboard so you can play the role of entrepreneur, the GM, the CEO, or whatever you're wanting to do. So then you have created, he called it that turnkey operation, that franchise model, and you've built a business that works for you, and going into a cliche, not a business that you're working for it. Again, understand why certainly small, medium businesses, SMBs, owners and leaders look a bit frazzled because there is lots to do. It's not an easy gig at times. It's crazy. But you've got to really amplify the roles that you're not playing, put time aside, invest time into those to be as successful as possible, to create that business you want, whatever that is.
So we all spend a huge amount of time at work. If you're a business owner, you've committed blood, sweat, tears, your time, your money, time away from your family and loved ones. So it's important that that work comes to something. And I think that's one of the key things for me as a takeaway from the E-Myth is that here's a way that you can start thinking about how you're going to do business. Create a vision for what you're trying to do or what you're already doing. Be intentional. Shift from technician to manager to entrepreneur. Start elevating yourself in the business and hire people in. Create an org chart of what your business is going to grow into, not just what it is today. Build systems so you don't have to just work harder. Almost every business in New Zealand is guilty of that one. Think of your business as a franchise. Even if you don't plan to franchise, determine your measure for business success and pay attention to it. Are you on or off track? Develop a business that serves your vision, not one that controls your life. Set time aside to plan. Ultimately, choose your hard. Put more work in up front and begin to benefit from that work, or have your job own you. Thanks for listening.